Hello! Welcome to the Dad Report, a podcast for dads, by dads, about dad stuff.
Join us as we sit down and have meaningful conversations with friends, family, and coworkers.
We will talk about life, family, and so much more while working towards a goal of creating a healthy idea of what it means to be a dad. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Dad Report, Season 2, Episode 4. Chad, we are plugging away here at these episodes. And
Yes, we are. Tonight? I'm good, man. Things are great down here in Jacksonville, the land that you left.
Wow. Okay.
No, things are good. Things are good down here in the Kirk household. Plugging along at summer. How about you?
We're doing well. It's summer. We're thankfully have had a couple of cooler mornings where it's looked like it's going to rain or storm, and then sun comes out, which means one of these afternoons I need to seriously do my oil change because it's been way too long since the last one, and I'm starting to notice my fuel efficiency drop. But we're good. Amelia had a weird day yesterday where she was just kind of freaking out and like crying the whole time and screaming, and Megan was texting me, but we think it was like combination of growth spurt, a little bit of teething, and also just being a girl. So she's better today, and we're glad for that.
Good times. You're in it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we do have a special guest tonight. So for those of you listening who tuned into last week's episode, this is somebody I was connected to through Reverend Raul. We're going to call him Brother Chad for the purpose of tonight, but this is a soon-to-be doctor of theology and pastoring, and I don't even know a doctorate of what, but he's going to have his doctorate because he's a super smart guy. He's going to use really large words like extemporaneous, which got a chuckle out of a previous position. I used to work for him and still value him highly as a friend. I don't think he hates my guts, and I definitely enjoyed the time I spent with him. Please welcome Chad Logan to the show.
Wow, the applause was amazing. Thank you, Joe.
I'll find a sound, like one of those little sound panels later, and do like the clapping.
Please do.
Okay.
No, yeah, great introduction. Yeah, man, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate you guys doing this and inviting me on the show, and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, welcome. So we will call you, like you told us beforehand, to call you Brother Chad because you pastor in Mississippi, so it's brother.
That's how we roll in Mississippi, you know. And in Georgia, it was more like Pastor Chad or maybe Reverend Raul. But here, everybody's brother, not bro.
No,
not bro.
No,
it's Brother Chad. So hey, I just roll with whatever.
There you go. Now, tell us a little bit about the church that you're pastoring down there, because if I remember correctly, this is the one you came up in.
So I am from the county that I pastor, but I'm not from this town. I grew up about 10 minutes north of where I currently serve as pastor. However, I served as the youth pastor in this church, First Baptist Church, Calhoun City, when I was in college. And so I have deep relational ties to this church, and it's a church that is over 100 years old. It is a very deeply rooted community church, and it was built by the greatest generation. And you know, over the past 5 to 10 years, we've had at least a dozen people die. So we're in transition to really grow younger and reach a younger generation. And so for me, and you know a lot about my leadership personality, I love challenges. And I love taking an organization to the next level. And so I transitioned during COVID.
Yeah.
And the silver lining there was, you know, we can start new.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can start turning the tide a little faster than we normally could. And so we've seen some really positive traction. It's taken some some time, some relational equity to build in the community. But it's certainly a good thing that I'm from the area. People know me, they know my family, and that's been definitely a huge plus. So
that's awesome. And you are married with 2 boys. You have Satch, who I know from my time spent with you, and then Baxter, who I think was born towards the end of my brief tenure with you guys, correct?
yeah, so Satch is 9 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, he'll be going into the 4th grade. And then Baxter is 2.5. He'll be 3 at the beginning of next year. So our hands are full, and I'm 41, so a 41-year-old with
wow, he put it out there, y'all.
half-year-old. I did, man. I just feel old to be a father to such young children, and it is exhausting but very rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get to that a little later, but it's been a huge blessing. I mean, it's man, there's no manual to fatherhood.
No, sir.
There's only experience, and every day is anew. They are actually in Kentucky right now, visiting family. And so I am getting a pretty enjoyable week of just R&R.
It's a good thing this episode comes out way later.
Yeah, exactly.
So that way Kelly's not like, wait a second. Let's talk about COVID. So that's kind of the most recent kind of big item with you. Because last, I guess, brief history, you were the campus pastor at a campus that no longer exists. It shut down during COVID. You transitioned away prior to that happening, but at the very start of COVID, I was already in Jacksonville by that point. Talk to us about how that transition went, how you handled it with family, both how you handled COVID with family, especially Baxter would have been a couple of months old, and then how you handled taking on an already existing church, but kind of bringing that fresh, younger generation perspective to it.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Sorry.
I knew deep in my spirit in Georgia that God was calling me to pastor a unique congregation and preach week in, week out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was clear that God did not just call me, but he called my wife and my family to that end as well. And I wanted to make sure that obviously my wife was on board with any transition.
Yeah.
And, in retrospect, we can talk about this now, but there were multiple opportunities, and there were some, when I say, kind of lucrative in the sense that, maybe more money, more access to cities, that sort of thing. And my wife is highly emotionally intelligent. And for me, it's just like, hey, let's go interview and let's convince them that we are who they need, kind of thing.
Right.
And there were multiple opportunities where there were red flags. And so through that whole season of when COVID hit, we interviewed at multiple churches, and we closed a lot of doors. And I felt like, looking back now, and following a lot of those churches and those ministries, it's clear that it was a good thing that Kelly and I together prayed through those decisions, because now, it's obvious that we are where we need to be, where God has called us to be.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so important that, especially if you're in ministry and not even ministry, but any position, I just believe the family has to be called to move to a job, etc. No matter how hard the calling is. I mean, you just have to be obedient. So we knew from the very beginning that God called us here. In fact, I tried to talk the church out of trying to hire me. When they called me, I said, I don't really think you know who I am anymore. I'm not the Chad you knew growing up.
Right.
And I said, if you're really interested in me being your pastor, I want you to watch this Sunday, because I'll be preaching at church. And I can remember that week, Justin, like I was, like I wore, skinny jeans, and all my illustrations, all my illustrations were like, Gen Z. And I had like this really crazy illustration where water splashed in the floor.
Oh, I'm sure they love that.
Right.
Did someone have a conniption?
What? I mean, I talked to the pastor search team the next week, and they said, God has called you to be our pastor. And it was just clear.
Wow.
And it was such a stark contrast to the ministry that I'd come from. Now, 2 years removed from being called here, it's still abundantly clear that God is all in this decision. I mean, we're reaching more younger people we've ever reached before, baptizing more people than we've ever baptized before. We're becoming more diverse than we've ever been. I don't know if you know about White Church in Mississippi, but there's a lot of segregated roots, honestly. And so I came in the very beginning, really pushing back against the segregated stereotype of white church, because we are in a very diverse community. And within the second month of me being here, we baptized the first African-American in the history of the church.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And, yeah. And
in the middle of COVID.
We just had on Saturday over 600 people in our church, black and white, for a funeral, which has never happened. So, I say that I'm not saying that, we have changed overnight, but we are making healthy strides in a healthy direction. We're a town that we're on the decline. People graduate from high school, they leave. There's not a lot of opportunity here. So the town in general needs revitalization. We need more industries. And so I work with the city council, with the revitalization team, and Kelly works with the beautification team. It's one of the core values we have in our church is community engagement. I mean, we want to be a beacon of hope for the community. And it's not the rat race of Metro Atlanta. I mean, we don't miss the traffic. We don't miss,
it's not gotten any better. It's not any better.
And church world here is very communal. I mean, it really is a more accurate picture of Acts 2. I may have to take a lady tomorrow to have surgery in the morning at 5:30 in the morning. It's that kind of thing, and she's like 90 years old, and then I'll go visit someone else in the hospital, and I'll go have coffee with somebody on the front porch. In Atlanta, it's very transient. You may have a neighbor for a year, they're gone the next. But here you really get to know people. You get to know their family. And that's a good thing. I mean, that's been healthy for my family. And we are loved well here. Every meal this week has been fresh vegetables. I mean, it has been amazing. And so it's a different way of life, but it's a good way of life. So it's been an outstanding transition for us.
So, Chad, can I call you Chad?
You can, Chad.
uh, so I just want to step back for a minute because at least the way I was understanding, you were talking about how they're like, hey, you're coming here, and you were like, well, I'm gonna pull out every stop I can. Like, God, if this is something you're doing, you're
Exactly.
gonna have to do this. So I would just wonder if you could talk a little bit about like what it was like going through that. And I'm guessing some of that hesitation you had, some of that pushback you had was really because you knew what you would be stepping into. Is
No
that,
question.
I mean, is that accurate?
No question. And I knew the church in the past had dealt with some racial tension. I knew the church in the past had dealt with some authority issues related to influential families in the church.
Okay.
And I came swinging really hard on the front end. And I did that intentionally, Chad, because I knew, I couldn't pretend it wasn't an issue and then start making it an issue. I punched really hard on the front end, and I'll just be honest. I said, I was in the baptistry, and I said, I mean, such a big. And this was the Sunday that I baptized my 8-year-old son at the time.
Oh,
Oh,
Or
wow.
7 year. And I made a bigger deal out of the baptism for this African American because it was such a to me a critical juncture in the life of our church.
mm-hmm.
And I mean, I probably swung too hard, and Justin, the dynamic of the staff that we were before that. Sometimes we just didn't care. We just said it, and I practically said, "Hey, if you have issues with this, don't let the door hit you on the way out because heaven's going to be full of diversity." And so people knew where I stood right there. And I used many illustrations about my best friend who, is African American, and so people knew real quick. And I probably swung too hard in the beginning, but what I would rather swing too hard in the beginning than pretend like that was not a conviction, and then all of a sudden
now it's a conviction.
Okay.
But I don't think that any pastor could do this because again, I've got a relationship with this church.
For sure. Yeah.
Since I was a teenager. And so, for example, one of the football coaches, we played football together. The other football coach, we have a good relationship with, and I share devotion every week with his team, and we're doing things that the church has never done in the history of the church. We laugh and talk about the greatest generation and how amazing they were. But one of the things that they failed to do, they failed to empower the next generation with leadership. And so there's a huge leadership gap under that generation. And so I see in many regards to my role, passing the baton to Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Y, even Gen X. And I mean, these boomers have to pass the baton. They knew that. They were at a desperation point. And so I asked them some difficult questions if they would be willing to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I got very surprising answers.
Okay.
And while, I think if they were here, they would say, it's different. It can be hard at times, but we're willing to do whatever we need to do to reach people for Christ. We created core values. We created a mission statement, inspire everyone to know Jesus and make him known. So we have a clarity in our church more than we've ever had before. The church in the past has made mountains over molehills, and they've made big issues that were not major biblical issues. and so the statement that we say around here is that we're not going to teach anything less than the Bible, but also not anything more than the Bible. So we've stripped away a lot of that extra that we've caked onto cultural Christianity, and it's been an awakening thing here, but it's been a good thing for sure.
Because that's refreshing to hear.
Yeah, what we're doing is that we're reversing the stereotype the community had against the church.
Sure.
That's what we're doing. And we had the reputation of being the big white church where all the rich people went to church. And now, we are very welcoming. We are much more casual and approachable. And I feel like everybody in the community knew that was my personality, but I think they were wondering, is he really going to put his money where his mouth is?
Yeah.
And I think over time, we just have to keep the course.
That's good. That sounds like you definitely found your fit in some of the things that you and I talked about in meetings many a time. You're getting to kind of finally walk out, and God's allowed you to do that, and that's cool. That's really cool.
So we hear a lot about, especially with COVID, a lot of the controversy going on there, with a lot of the, race related tension that's going on everywhere, right? That pastors are really afraid to, and I don't know that it's just in the church. I'm sure leaders, and other organizations are the same, but that pastors are really afraid to mention it, also not to mention it, and it's kind of in a weird place. So have you seen the your church really being hungry to bring some of these changes that you kind of talked about, some of the things like you said you kind of came out swinging? How has that been?
Chad, it's interesting because I don't hear a lot of talk about that. And I think in large part is because I am the pastor. And I totally feel the tension because what I really do is make everything that I say from the pulpit about the Bible. And that goes back to our first core value, which is biblical authority. Okay. And, it's funny. And I tell people, it doesn't matter if you lean conservative or if you lean liberal, you're going to be offended here because the Bible's got something to offend everybody.
It's like you've been listening to Joby.
I was going to say, it sounds familiar.
And worse, I mean, I offend myself, in the middle of the message. I mean, you're going to get offended. And so there is a very strong cultural Christian nationalistic perspective in Mississippi. And what that means is that people identify as Christians because of their political persuasion or the home they grew up in. Their dad was a pastor. They identify as a Christian, but that only really means, it just means that I have a cultural persuasion. Yeah. And so when I came in originally, there was a lot of bewilderment that what he's saying does not necessarily align with what I think when I think of my cultural Christian perspective. But I do think there's a willingness and a lot of epiphanies that are happening. Like, yeah, that's right. That's what the Bible says. And so again, I there's nobody who would be willing to talk about any political issue from a biblical perspective. I can remember back in, I think it was November of 20, we did a couple messages called The Politics of Jesus. And as you can imagine, we offended everybody. And we actually had people who left our church.
All right.
Because of that message. And honestly, I was okay with it because potentially it may have been those people who kept other people from coming to our church. And but at the same time, I will say, especially in the day and age that we live in, I do feel like some pastors are a little gun shy about political and cultural and social issues. I felt that, the week after the reversal of Roe v. Wade, I felt like it would be tone deaf not to mention the reversal of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Right. If you read the Bible, it's, clearly pro-life. And so we discussed that. And, I would probably venture and say 95% of our church has Fox News on their on their TV every night. And, I just think we've navigated those waters the best we can. We live in and you all know this, we live in a culture where with the internet, everybody has their own platform, right? You don't just have one or two TV stations you listen to anymore. You've got all these different sources and all these different theories. And then you put all those people together in a church and everybody disagrees. And that's why I just want to say, look, if you disagree with me, you're disagreeing with the Bible. I just want to be, the Bible guy and, and just keep it that simple. That's it. Yeah. Because in my particular denomination, Southern Baptist Convention, it's a microcosm. There's your word, Justin. It's a
one of many.
It's a microcosm of the division that we see on mainstream media, and that's division, and it breaks my heart, and it's unbiblical. So we fail to be subject to that division, because what we've seen churches, even in our area, divide over these issues. And guess what? It totally impairs their ability to reach out. Who really wants to go to a church where the deacons, the leaders, the staff, the pastors are all divided over issues? Right?
Nope.
I mean, who wants to be a part of that church? Nobody. We wonder why, people aren't coming back to church post-COVID, and 1 in 10 kids who grew up in church aren't a part of church because they've had those experiences. And what I believe it's poor leadership by pastors, by deacons, etc. So we're making great headway. I feel like I'm still in that phase of building more relational equity, trust. And it's been good. It's been really good. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good to hear.
Ooh. So talk to us then, while you're doing all that and you're building and you're preaching the Bible and being the Bible guy, which, I mean, I was at a student pastor conference one time, and that he was sharing a story, and I guess the guy was scared to preach, and he gets up there and just reads Hebrews like 3, just the whole chapter, gets up, reads it, sits down. Later, somebody walked up and was like, oh, that was it? That was your sermon? He goes, I can't screw that up. Like, there's no way I can mess it up. I just read straight out of the Bible. So talk to us then about how at the same time you are being a father. Let's jump into that a little bit. The whole kind of goal of our show is healthy fatherhood, healthy parenting. So while you've also been leading, tackling a church, and you sound like you're in this really healthy spot. It sounds like it's going great, but there's obviously days and we can all attest this, that it's not so great. Or you got the guy who decided he's going to swing back, right? And threaten, whether it's financial or social, or I'll burn you down to the town or whatever. But how have you navigated your family and being a dad and being a good husband, while at the same time also pointing this church in a direction of life and in a direction of new and moving it forward?
Yeah. So, I think the first reality that I had to embrace was that, my personality is bent towards ministry. I love ministry. I want to do ministry, but if I'm not careful, it will be overwhelming to me, and I will neglect those that I love the most, namely my family. I started realizing that in Georgia.
Okay.
And I was a part of a men's group. We met on Thursdays at Chick-fil-A, and we called it a shepherd's group. And together we crafted these core values of our life. And one of those core values, you'll appreciate this, came from something that I heard Andy Stanley say. And
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how Andy phrased it, but the way that I phrased it is, my legacy lives most in who I raise, not what I do. And I just thought, man, that's a powerful, powerful statement. And I had one too many conversations with my wife about neglecting my family and choosing ministry over and I realized, if I can't pastor my home, then I can't pastor my church. And, from today, I want to choose my family over my church. I've got to pastor my family. And I saw so many pastors just burn out and, moral failure. And we see that week in and week out in ministry. And I believe personally that these guys burn out because, number one, they're neglecting their family, and they're neglecting their faith, and they're not pouring into themselves. They're just pouring out, and they're leading on empty. And so they're trying to find in sin or brokenness or adultery and what they could only get in their faith. And so they wake up one day and they're burned out. They don't know what to do. And I knew if I didn't do something, I didn't want to wake up in that position.
Sure.
And so I knew something had to give. And, here in Mississippi, the pace is different, and life is just a little slower.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I needed. People understood the importance of allowing their pastor time to pour into their family. And I'll never forget. I was reading a biography on Billy Graham, and it was an interview, and the interviewer asked him, "What is your greatest regret in life?" Now, I mean, we're talking about this guy who, he's preached to like 50 million people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking like, prayer, more Bible reading. And he gets all emotional and he says, "I wish I would have spent more time with my children." I was like, wow, can you, I always have this, when God's working on my spirit and in my heart, he doesn't like speak to me audibly, but he always takes me to the end of my life, which is really strange. And he plays back my life. And I ask myself, what are those regrets that I wish I would have done differently? And I live with that question concurrently with life. I try to live a life where I minimize those regrets. And I know there every dad who's full-time in any job, I mean, he wishes he could, I would hope he wishes he could spend more time with his children. I get that. But if we as dads, if we're not careful, we're gonna give our wife, we're gonna give our children sloppy seconds, and we will live a life full of regret. And there's a lot of things in life where we can get a do-over with, but raising your children's not one of them.
Yeah.
And so
that's intense there. Wow.
Yeah. And so that could be the most important thing about you, because that's how you will be known, by who you raise. And it's not that you can control everything about your kids. I mean, good night. But boy, I mean, we have to give that over to God in prayer. Just this past week, we baptized a junior in high school, and he, one of the most introverted, quiet students that we've ever had. And the thing that I admire most were his parents, who were faithful in making him come to church, and making sure he went to youth camp. And yes, he loves baseball. He's a great athlete, but they decided, no matter what, we're going to make sure our son's in church, because he doesn't know the Lord. And we want to make every decision as though we are preparing him for meeting Jesus. And, I don't get into the big theological debates on, pre-faith regeneration and all the details of that. But what I do know is that I'm not really sure I would have baptized him this past week if he did not have faithful parents who were praying for him, who had other people praying for him, who drug him to church. And as a result, he met Jesus. So I just think, man, parenting is the foundation and fabric of our entire society today. I tell people all the time, we don't have the greatest issue we have is not in the White House. It's in our house. It doesn't matter who's in the White House.
That's a good one.
That'll preach.
I mean, we like to skirt around our own responsibility and blame somebody else. But at the end of the day, it's about what's going on in our home. So
the greatest issue we have is not in the White House. It's in our house.
It's in our house. Woo.
Oh, that might preach. I might add that to a message soon. I don't know.
You probably should. That'll be your tweetable one-liner.
I know Justin's going to. So,
well, I'm preaching to students. So I'll give credit where I prefer Chadisms. Whenever I use extemporaneous, I'll be like, Pastor Chad, extemporaneous.
Is that really a big word? I mean,
okay. So the backstory for our listeners and for the Chad, not Brother Chad, is Brother Chad and I were sitting in a staff meeting at the church we worked at. And in the all staff meeting, there's like, I don't know, 20 of us in there, 15, 20. I think Megan was even at that time during her very, very brief tenure. She was in the room as well. And something came up and Chad gets talking. And all of a sudden, I think he's praying. I think he's praying us out. He just drops the word. He just goes, we just need some extemporaneous, yada, yada, yada. And the whole staff just started chuckling because he's known for these. And
I didn't remember that.
I know. Well, you had a lot happen since then. And that was, that was a season of life. And there's some memories I'm sure you take away and some you're like, that's not relevant. But yeah, that was a funny moment. So from then on, Megan and I, every now and then when we're reminiscing about those days, we're like extemporaneous. So then later, I think he tried to explain it.
I'm sure I used extemporaneously.
That's right.
Sure
Oh man.
No, but we are experiencing I would say in our community, we're experiencing a generation of fatherless children.
Mm.
And one of the things that we've done in our church is we've created a program in our church where we adopt fatherless boys ages 4 to 14.
Okay.
And we have a program that we take them, we play baseball, go fishing, we take them on a camping trip, we bring them to church, and we work with the single mom because if you just look at the statistics in our country, almost like 25% of children are living in home without a biblical father, a healthy father, or really any father. But then, to make matters worse, you start looking in our prison system, and 90% of prisoners grew up in a home without a father. 80% of criminals. So you can say what you want, but the stats speak for themselves. Our boys need young biblical fathers.
Yeah.
And the culture that we are growing up in does not value just biblical fatherhood. And we've got to get in these homes and be the church. That's why, like when I spoke a couple weeks ago about the reversal of Roe v. Wade, I didn't say, touchdown, we won, game over. Like, game just starts. Like, it just started. That was the kickoff, and the ball's in our court. We've got to start running some plays because we've got an opportunity now that we've never had before.
Yes.
What are we going to do with the child who is now born who doesn't have a father?
Yeah.
How are we going to live out James 1:27 and take care of the orphans and the widows? That's the big question now that Roe v. Wade has reversed.
And the world's watching.
No question. How is the church going to respond? It's much bigger than a political issue. So we as a church, we've got to create opportunities to connect single moms to fathers who love Jesus and can inject a sense of biblical fatherhood into the next generation.
Yeah,
it's a huge task.
Yeah, that's great. Y'all are doing that. Love that.
I think more churches need to do something similar for sure.
Just putting the opportunity out there, saying, hey,
right,
we got men, hey, single moms, if you're into it, come on, and just letting that happen. I love it.
Yeah, we have such a huge need. The counselor in the local school goes to our church, and so we've got some pipelines of connections that we've already made, and it's just been a huge blessing seeing those relationships unfold. And so I think this type of ministry, I think it's so much bigger than just helping those who don't have fathers. I mean, it brings a picture of the church that we've never seen here, and I think it communicates to the community. Wow, they're really committed on being the church, because there's been such an emphasis of just we go to church. That's what we do. We just check the box. We did our weekly duty to Jesus. And now this ministry is is a sobering reality, because the needs here are overwhelming, and we have resources that other churches don't have, and so it's definitely been a good thing for us.
That's great.
Yeah. Wow.
That's so good. Well, we'll start wrapping this thing up, Chad. I think we've squeezed a lot of wisdom out of you without having to squeeze very much. And you've been very willing to talk, and we really appreciate it. We do have Raul told us last week, so we're going to segue that we have to ask you about this. So for those who listened to last week's, here's a reminder. And for those who are listening new tonight, Chad Logan used to run a podcast way back in the day about college ministry. I'm slowly starting to see some of the recognition turning in his head over there. And Raul said that you need to share the story of how the last episode, which broke the podcast, was something to do with Raul and a corrupt file.
Bro, you got me. I have no idea.
That's hilarious.
I mean, that's been maybe 10 years.
Oh wow.
10 years ago.
Oh,
But
sad.
Raul, he was we're a lot alike in the sense that we just love people. We love outreach, and he was known as the guy in college ministry who did crazy stuff that just reached a crazy number of college students. And I thought, I've got to have this guy on the podcast.
Yeah.
And he was doing some things on campus at the time that no other campus would attempt to do. Only Raul could do those. And so we struck up a friendship, and then he ended up moving to the Beaufort area.
Yeah.
And he's Raul. Nobody can be Raul. He is the one and only. But we probably did an entire podcast, and it probably just totally didn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually listened to a few episodes from your podcast back when I was first working for you. And I was going to say, I don't remember Raul being on there. So.
Oh, well, maybe he didn't make it. I can't remember.
He said something about a corrupt file, and he was like, I'll let you ask Chad about that. So.
Yeah. He probably was so terrible. I just didn't want to air
it. Oh, the file got corrupted. Yeah.
Yeah, corrupted file. Never do that. That was fun though. I mean, that back in the day. Oh, it was on Friday afternoons. I didn't have really much to do, so we created a podcast, and I would be embarrassed to go back and listen to it now. I'm sure there were crazy audio files and things that were just
back when you were cutting edge.
It created a platform that college ministry did not have at the time. It ended up turning into a ministry called the Collegiate Collective. So when I moved to Georgia, the North American Mission Board in my denomination adopted the podcast, and it was hosted by the National Collegiate Director. And I think they still create podcasts. They have a website. They have resources.
Okay.
And it was created really for selfish reasons. I wanted to hear from some of the guys around the country who were doing things better than me. So I just wanted to call them up and say, hey man, how do you do freshman ministry? How do you do your leadership? How do you hire? How do you raise money?
Yeah.
And I got like all this good stuff. And I thought, well, if I enjoy it, I'm pretty sure everybody else would enjoy it. So we created a podcast.
There you go. And that sparked something else. Well, all right. The Chad, you got anything else for brother Chad here while we still got him?
I don't think so. I think we kind of hit everything, even some of the stuff we didn't bring up. I think Chad got it, and just in the conversation. So I think we're good. This was great. It was great meeting you, man. And good luck to you and your church. It sounds like you've got a love for the word and for for the Lord and for the people that you pastor. It's great. It's refreshing to hear some of the stuff you're doing, and we cheer you on.
Thank you, Chad. Meet you. Appreciate you guys.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you once again. Just love having you. Love seeing your face again and hearing from you. At some point, I'll need to get I know you updated your phone number, and then I couldn't keep track of which one was which, so I've lost your contact pretty much entirely. There is a Chad Logan in my phone with 2 numbers, and one is correct, and one will probably get me some stranger. So, but it's good seeing you again. Glad to hear things are going well down there. If I'm ever through Mississippi and ever through Calhoun, we will be sure to come on and visit. And thanks for sharing all these nuggets of wisdom with dads out there and society. So on that, I think we're going to roll out.
And thank you guys. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. Yep. All right. And with that, we is out of here.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can support us by sharing the show with your friends and family. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a review.
Want more of The Dad Report? Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and even join the community over on Discord. Don't forget to send us your dad jokes for a chance to be featured on the show.
Remember the words of Billy Graham about fatherhood. A good father is one of the most unsung, unpraised, unnoticed, and yet one of the most valuable assets in our society.
So if you are a dad, we're cheering you on. If you have a dad, be kind to him. And if you know a dad, tell him about our podcast.